All right, welcome back to the Defying Gravity podcast with Zach Goodman. Today we're going to talk about motor units. We're going to talk about training theory. We're going to talk about what is the big picture of training. Okay, we're going to cover this from a couple different lenses, from a strength lens, a speed lens, and a hypertrophy lens, and how those kind of intersect in a way. Okay, so let's get started on motor units. Okay, so firstly, what is a motor unit? So how a motor unit works is there's a neuron that's going to get stimulated via the need to produce force. So force is what's going to necessitate a motor unit to fire. Okay, so a neuron is going to innervate or connect with muscle fibers. Okay, so this neuron is going to create an intervention with a muscle fiber, creating a motor unit. So um, a neuron and a muscle fiber are going to create a motor unit. Okay, this motor unit is going to discharge to complete a task. Okay, via force. Okay, so if, for example, you are picking up something like a box, okay, you're going to have motor units that are going to discharge to pick up that box. Okay, so anytime your body's producing force, there are going to be motor units that are going to be firing. Okay, whether those are high threshold or not, what we're going to talk about is going to depend a lot on the intent of the exercise and the intent of the task and the potency of the stimulus. Okay. So again, anytime we produce force, motor units are going to be discharged. Okay. So that all that means is motor units are going to be fired. Okay. To complete task. Okay. Something to note as we kind of get into this topic a bit more is that motor units are going to be discharged in a lazy fashion. So what that means is when I say motor units are discharged in a lazy fashion, it means the body does not want to discharge motor units maximally. Okay, and so what that means is that we have this kind of spectrum of different fibers and motor units. Okay, if the stimulus is not strong enough, your body is not going to discharge maximal motor units. Okay, so for example, if I pick up say I have a 200-pound bench press, right? And I only bench 100 pounds. I'm not going to, for one, I'm not going to achieve maximal motor unit recruitment because it's such a low threshold of what I'm actually capable of. My body is only going to discharge as many motor units as necessary to complete that task. Okay. So what that means is the potency of the stimulus is going to decide how many motor units my body discharges. The body is very greedy with motor units. It does not want to discharge maximal motor units unless necessary. Okay. Because ultimately, motor units are also a way for us to survive. Okay. So the body is constantly trying to survive. If we discharge all motor units, okay, we risk potential of dying, right? And so we actually have motor unit reserves. We'll see in like surgeries and things. Even after motor units appear to be completely discharged, there is reserve motor units to keep us alive. So when we actually die, we discharge all the motor units we have available while we die. And so what that means is if we discharge all of our motor units all at once, okay, and with even with our reserves, we could potentially die. So if a stimulus is strong enough, it can kill us, right? So obviously, a weightlifting or strength training is not going to be a strong enough stimulus to kill us, but in the event that we had a stimulus that was strong enough, it could potentially kill us because it would discharge all those motor units. Okay. And so what this also means is there's not really any upper threshold of strength feats or speed feats because we have tapped in reserves. We have reserves of motor units that we have not recruited or fatigued and developed yet. And so what that means is that there's always an upper level, there's always an upper potential, right? And genetics is going to dictate how far we can kind of recruit those upper threshold of our motor units. Okay, so some people are just going to be able to recruit more than others. Some people are going to be able to tap into those further levels of motor unit recruitment, those larger ones, more often than somebody else. And obviously, training is going to allow us to kind of do that more. But genetics is also going to raise the genetics of someone's nervous system is also going to be really, really important. So that's why we see people that are like lifting these crazy feats in strength sports. They just might be more genetically predisposed, aside from like leverages and things like that. They may be genetically more predisposed to recruit higher threshold motor units at a greater rate than somebody without even with training being equal. Okay. So again, the body wants to discharge these motor units in a pretty lazy fashion, which means that we need to give it a strong enough stimulus in order to recruit all of them and develop all of them. Okay. So some principles kind of going along with that, some principles we have to understand is firstly the all or nothing principle. Okay, so motor units are going to discharge in an all or nothing fashion. And so what that means is that motor units don't half discharge or discharge periods of time. Motor units are going to either be all out or all in. Okay. So if I have a max effort bench press, for example, and I'm going to max out, and it's going to be the heaviest weight I can strain, say it's sub 0.3 meters per second, my body is going to tap in. It's going to fire all the motor units it has available in an all or nothing fashion. So a motor unit will not half fire, it will only go 0 to 100. Okay. And so this is known as the all or nothing principle. Okay. And they fired in all or nothing fashion. Okay. So this is important to understand in that you can't kind of finesse your way into motor units being recruited. They're either going to be fired or they're not going to be fired. So this kind of makes, as we start to talk about like what this means for training, you're going to start seeing the importance of having strong enough stimulus in training. Okay. Other things we have to understand: the small to big principle, okay, or the size principle. Motor units. Motor units are going to be discharged from small to big. And what that means is the smaller the motor unit, the less force it's able to produce. And then as we begin to recruit more and larger motor units, generally going to be type 2 fibers. So those neurons are going to innervate with type 2 fibers. Type 2 fibers are bigger. Okay. It's going to produce more force. Okay. So in a task that is submaximal, we are not going to necessarily reach that full spectrum, or a task that is of long endurance, right? So it's submaximal forces, but it's for a prolonged period of time. We're not going to discharge those really high frequency, those really high large motor units because they're going to be more fatiguing, or those fibers, I should say, they're going to be more fatigued, right? So the bigger the motor unit, the more force we produce, but the more fatigable it is. Okay. The smaller the motor unit, okay, so we're talking about like type 1 fibers, okay, so like endurance or like, submaximal force, repeated. Okay. Those are going to be smaller, but they're going to also produce smaller amounts of force, but they're going to be less fatigue resistant. They're going to be more fatigue resistant. Okay. Which means they're not going to get tired as often. Okay. And so what this means is that when we are trying to essentially develop a powerful athlete, we need to tap into those type 2 fibers. We need to tap into those large motor units. We need to fatigue those really large ones, right? That are a bit more, a bit less resistant to fatigue, right? They're going to fire a lot of force at once, but they're going to get tired pretty fast. Those are the type of motor units that we want to develop and improve upon and improve more motor unit recruitment. Okay. That's ultimately what we want to do when it comes to training a powerful athlete versus maybe training a endurance based athlete. Maybe they never tap into those high threshold leads, even though they should, if they want to get maximal, if they want to get the most out of those small motor units, they should be able to tap into those larger ones. But again, that comes down to training, like kind of like conjugate training or concurrent training, where you're training, strength qualities that maybe are not specifically seen in a sport like cross country. You'd still have them get strong. While they may not tap into type 2 fibers at all points of their race, they may still tap into type 2 fibers at the end of the race when they are sprinting to that finish line. Okay. So it still becomes important from a motor unit recruitment standpoint. Okay. So to understand the size principle that all motor units, they're going to fire across the spectrum. Okay. So when you initially, another kind of way I can make this make sense is if I lifted a 10 rep max, okay, those first few reps are not going to tap into type 2 fibers because it's not going to be a strong enough stimulus, right? And so I'm not going to tap into those high threshold motor units, those big large ones that produce a lot of force. I'm not going to tap into those until the end of my 10 rep max, right? So those first 6 or 7, I might not even tap into type 2s until 7, 8, 9, 10. Those last few reps, they're going to be the most stimulating reps you have in a set. Those are going to fire across all motor units. Those are going to recruit those type 2 fibers to those largest fibers to complete a task via force. Okay. So we got to understand the size principle. Okay. We also have to understand high threshold motor units. So these high threshold motor units that I've been talking about, these are the hardest to recruit because they require the most potent of stimulus, right? They're also the largest and they're also the easiest to fatigue. Okay. So high threshold motor units are going to be the very last motor units that somebody can recruit. Okay. So when I'm producing force in a force production event, high threshold motor units are the last ones that I'm able to recruit. Okay. But they're also very fatigable, which means that they are, they produce a lot of force, but they get tired very fast. You can only discharge them for short moments of time. Okay. The body is also very greedy with high threshold motor units. Okay. Because they are so freaking strong, the body does not want to discharge them unless it absolutely has to. So you have to understand with training, we are manipulating the body to fire these motor units that does not want to fire. We are forcing the body via resistance, via force production, to fire motor units and develop this system of motor unit recruitment, even though it doesn't want to. Okay. Um, Other things I want to touch on, double discharges. Okay. If you follow me on Twitter, you may have heard me talk about this. I don't know if I talked about this in a recent podcast or not. But double discharges, what this means is a single motor unit discharges twice. Okay. So what you see is, and I actually just read this in a recent text that I was going through, is more hypertrophy based, but they talk about double discharges, and I found it in another text as well. From The first one was Brad Schoenfeld. He has a book on hypertrophy. Okay, so I read this in there, and then I also kind of cross referenced that with building back better athletes in America. Okay, that book as well. Good. So what this means is that a single motor discharges twice. Okay, so it spikes twice. Okay. And this is to accomplish a task of extreme force. Okay. And so what this known as is cellular potentiation. Okay. So a doublet discharge, when a motor unit discharges twice, right? It had a doublet discharge. Okay. That is potentiation happening. Okay. That means that the motor unit is going to recruit more force than it originally did because it's discharging twice in a back to back fashion. Okay. And this is just a single motor unit discharging 2 times. Okay. In a very short, brief amount of time in a double spike. Okay. And so this is known as potentiation. The potentiation that people are after. This has kind of got me thinking on training theory a bit. And I'll make a video on that. But something else to also note: these double discharges also you cannot discharge a motor unit twice with a sub maximal effort. Okay. And so what this means is that you cannot discharge a motor unit in 2 times if the stimulus is not super, super strong. So if I'm lifting 60% of my max, I'm never going to have a double discharge. If I'm doing maybe that, speed squats, I'm never going to have a double discharge because it's not a strong enough extreme, kind of force production event, right? So the only time you're going to have a double discharge is either under extreme load, like I'm talking like max effort type of load, or extreme speed. So like sprinting or a vertical jump, something that's really, really, really fast. Okay. So that's going to be the only time that you're going to see a double discharge. You're not going to see double discharges in anything else, but it does have me thinking, as far as potentiation goes, what types of things we need to be using to potentiate, and if we could somehow leverage these double discharges in different events. So something I've thought about, and I've kind of read more on it, but again, I'm not. I'll talk about that at a different time. But again, submaximal stimulus cannot create double discharges. Okay. Um, so training application wise, which is why most of you come to listen to me talk, is to hear me talk about training application. Okay. I cover this from a few different things, and some notes on a few different things. Okay. Firstly, strength. Okay. When we want to recruit maximal motor units, okay, we need to use really high intensities, right? I said that our body does not want to discharge motor units maximally unless it has to. So we need to be using intensities that are super high, like 85 to 100%. Okay. So that brief maximal tension to max effort kind of rep range or intensity zone, I mean. We need to be using really, really high levels of weights, really high intensities. Okay. And so what this is going to do is this is going to be a potent stimulus to ensure that also high threshold motor units are recruited. So when I'm maxing out, say I'm doing brief maximal tension sets of threes, okay, high threshold motor units are going to be recruited because the weights are going to be so high. I'm basically doing a 3 rep max, right? Because I'm using the brief maximal tension method, I'm essentially using, maximal weights for triples. Okay. And so what that's going to create is it's going to create a potent enough stimulus that's going to recruit high threshold motor units, right? And so ultimately, that's what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of recruit this entire spectrum of motor units to recruit. And so we can develop a stronger, no more neurologically powerful nervous system, right? And so that's why we're going to use, below 6 reps, right? We want to use below 6 reps because it's going to create an optimal firing pattern. Okay. Something many people don't understand that, Louis Simmons has talked about for, decades. And for some reason, people don't understand when he says this, that strength work is rate of force development work. Okay. And so we can look at that from a couple different lens. We can look at it from, oh, well, I increased the upper threshold, that, increase the ceiling, increase the floor kind of thing, which is true, right? If I didn't sharpen my rate of force development, say I can only, discharge like 60% of my, force in, at high velocities, and I increase my, newtons from 1,000 to 1,200. Now, even though my sharpened rate of force development doesn't increase, that percentage doesn't increase. I still have more newtons to kind of pull on, and that percentage, the percentage just basically raises the amount. Um, people kind of see it like that, but also what people are not understanding is that Louis understood optimal discharge frequencies, right? And so when we are using low reps, we're creating a firing pattern that is going to mimic, rate of force from high velocities, right? So, for example, max effort, right? Louis used to say max effort is speed work. Okay, nobody understood what he meant. I mean, some people understood what he meant, but many people didn't. They didn't understand. The constant and constant is, oh, max effort's for strength, they make it for speed. Max effort is also for speed. Okay, I just want to make that very clear. Max effort also develops rate of force development because the frequency in the sequence that these motor units pretty much fire in is very much in line with a very high velocity movement as well, right? So if I'm maxing out, that entire spectrum of motor units is firing extremely, extremely quick because it has to overcome this, resistance via force production. When you're sprinting or you're jumping, it has to be done very, very quick, right? Gravity is that other resistance, and you're propelling mass at extremely fast rates. The body, assuming you're sprinting at max effort, you're jumping at max effort, the body's going to discharge extremely fast. So effort's going to be a really, really big thing here when it comes effort and speed, really. Okay. So the effort of the person and also the velocity of the movement is going to be the biggest thing when it comes to training rate of force development. So again, if you're using below 6 reps, if you're using those really low rep ranges with high intensities, you're actually going to create an optimal discharge frequency. You're going to create an optimal firing pattern. That's also going to be mimicked in high velocity movements. Okay. So when we do these long and drawn out sets, say we do sets of 15 or 20, right? This is one of my biggest, beefs I have with the 1x20 system, is that we're having these really long drawn out sets, right? And so what those sets are doing, they're creating. I told you, I've already said that motor units want to recruit only when this resistance is extremely hard, right? So if you did a set of 20, your reps don't really get hard until that back half, right? They don't really start to get hard, and maybe it's just lactic acid metabolite buildup, but they don't really get hard via force reduction until about rep 15, right? So that means your last 5 reps of that set of 20 are going to be your most fatigue. They're going to be the hardest, the most strain, right? And so something that 1x20 is argued, which is true, right? Is that yes, your last rep in a 1x20 set is kind of the same as a strain in a max effort rep. So if I maxed out one, or I did my 20th rep in a one set of 20, yes, the speeds are similar. That is true. Okay. The biggest kind of discrepancy between those, though, is that it takes me 19 reps to get to that one, whereas I just maxed, I already got that one. Right. If I did a set of 5, I already had those stimulating reps without all that other junk. Okay. And so, what this creates, aside from metabolite accumulation, which is fatigue accumulation, aside from that, it's creating a discharge frequency, and that the body is kind of longing out their ability to fire motor units. Right. So, if I want to create a powerful athlete, I need to recruit as many motor units in the shortest amount of time possible, which is rate of force development. Okay. If I want to discharge motor units that quickly, I cannot train the body to slowly discharge them over a set of 20, right? Because you are actually destroying those patterns of discharge frequency. Okay. So you have to use low rep sets in order to get that transfer from the weight room to sprinting and jumping. You have to. Okay. If you use sets of 8s and 10s and 12s and all that stuff, you are not going to see it transfer because you are creating a nervous system that is used to only firing after small bouts of force production. Okay, because the weights are super light. If I use an 8 rep or a 10 rep max, the weight doesn't get heavy to the last couple. If I'm using a 5 or a 4 or a 3 rep max, those weights are heavy right from the get go. Okay, so by using low rep heavy weights, you are teaching the nervous system to fire faster. Okay, because it has to, because it's already close enough to failure. It's already close enough for that strain naturally by using higher low rep sets. Okay, because the speeds are already slow. Okay, it's already close enough to failure. The body's going to discharge a lot faster because it has to. Whereas a really lightweight that you're doing for sets of 15s or 20s is not it's not going to have to recruit those high threshold motor units into the back half of them. Okay, so when we're looking at time, it's about the time to get to maximal muscular tension. I've said this before. I don't know if it's sometimes it goes over people's head when I say it, but it's not about the reps per se. It's more about the time to maximal muscular tension. It's about the time to maximal recruitment. Okay. The faster I can reach maximal recruitment, the more I can teach my body to fire faster, the better off I'm going to be in sport, because sports are in speeds, right? Sports really fast. You have to teach the body to fire faster. Okay. Um, so Louis Simmons talked about that. Okay. It's something that a lot of people don't touch on or talk about. And people completely ignore that max effort is rate of force development training in multiple ways, not just in one. So I want to touch on that. So speed. Okay, I've kind of already covered this, but as far as motor unit recruitment goes in speed, motor units are also going to be discharged maximally at high velocities. Okay, when effort is maximal. Okay, high threshold units can only be recruited at very slow or very high speeds. Okay, I've already talked about this a bit. Hopefully, this is starting to make sense. You cannot recruit those high threshold, those largest motor units, without either the speed being very slow or very fast if effort is maximal. Okay, so I can't do like a tempo, right? A sub maximal weight. If I do a set of 5, right, which is in line with that optimal firing pattern, but I put a 3-second eccentric tempo on those, that is a sub maximal effort because I'm not applying maximal acceleration into the barbell, right? Even in eccentric is acceleration. Okay. Even in eccentric is still acceleration. Okay. So people don't understand that as well, is that acceleration is a change in velocity. And so whether it's going forward or backwards, it's still a change in velocity. It's still acceleration. Your body is still accelerating, whether you know whether you want to accept that or not, based on physics. Um, but if you're doing a sub maximal tempo, you're not applying maximal force to it, whether you're doing a concentric or eccentric tempo. It's not maximal enough. Okay. So you're never going to recruit high threshold motor units. And I know Chris Beardsley has wrote about this as well. You can't recruit high threshold motor units with tempos. It has to be maximal speeds. It has to be maximal efforts. Okay. You let gravity and let the resistance kind of dictate the actual velocity of it. Okay. Other important thing here, anything in the middle is not going to achieve this. Okay. So if I'm using anything in the middle of velocity, whether, we said a strain, something really, really heavy for a single, or, max effort set of 5, something like that's really, really heavy, or something like a jump or a sprint, right? Those are going to be more dynamic and more speed. So we're talking about two different kind of parts of that force velocity curve. Okay. Something in the middle is not going to discharge high threshold motor units because it's in the middle. It has to be extreme enough to make change and to recruit those high threshold motor units. Okay. So for example, dynamic effort barbell work, because we're working in that, 50 to 60% range plus band tension. So, 75 to 85, whatever you want to say. Okay. Because the speeds are kind of in that middle range, they're in that, 0.6, 1 meter per second. You're never going to recruit max, high threshold motor units because it's not fast enough and it's also not slow enough. Okay. Same thing with power cleans and any type of lift or, exercise force event that is kind of in that middle zone. Okay. It's not going to recruit high threshold motor units because even with effort being maximal, say you're trying to really push that bar, your speed benching, you're trying to push that bar, through the roof, because the tension is not slow enough and also doesn't create enough speed, you can't recruit high threshold motor units with that. Okay. Doesn't mean it's not effective. It just means you're not effectively training and recruiting high threshold motor units. Okay. Because again, tensions have to necessitate that need for the body to discharge those high thresholds. Okay. Hypertrophy, another kind of way I want to look at this as well, because we talked about strengths. We're kind of covering this from those like three main, you know, um, muscular tension, kind of methods of max effort, dynamic effort, speed, or high repetition effort. I mean, okay, so we're going to cover this from a hypertrophy standpoint as well. Motor units are going to be important because the neurons are going to innervate with muscle fibers. Okay, we said that the neuron innervates with muscle fibers. Okay, muscle fibers will be stimulated through work, and they're going to eventually, again, adapt to that force that's being placed upon them, the tension that they're experiencing. Okay, hypertrophy of fibers can be achieved through many rep ranges, which is true. We've said that. Talk about this rep range a bit more, but hypertrophy can basically be stimulated pretty effectively between 5 and upwards of 30 reps from what we've seen. At least with studies, I'm sure it's probably more than that. But again, that's kind of what we've seen as the most efficient means of stimulating, tissue changes between 5 and 30 reps. Okay. But where many people go wrong with this, okay, many people go wrong with this, like, well, stimulating reps can be achieved between 5 and 20 or 5 and 30 reps, which is true. Okay. Well, again, we talked about those optimal discharge frequencies, the discharge frequency, the speed at which you can create and recruit maximal motor units. Okay. This is where people go wrong for athletic performance. A coach. I remember when I first got on strength and conditioning Twitter. It's kind of a side point. There was a coach that had a pretty big presence that used to come after a lot of people on their accounts, stuff for what they said. And I remember him saying, "Well, we don't need to max out. You could just." He's like, "It's all about the strain. You could do anything from 5 to 20 some, and so it's all about the strain for athletes." Which he was right as far as high threshold motor units go. Yes, you can train high threshold motor units with 20s, but he completely disregarded the size principle and the firing patterns. Okay, and then that's kind of when I knew he was full of shit. Um, and he also had some wise words to say about some really, really good professionals in the field, and that they didn't know what they were talking about. But another story for another day. Um, so where was I at for hypertrophy? Okay, we need to use higher rep ranges to stimulate hypertrophy. Okay, but when we use too high of rep ranges, okay, we extend the time necessary for high threshold motor units. Okay, and so ultimately, those last few reps being those fatigue, that kind of like stimulating rep model that they've kind of talked about recently, with like 5 reps or so. You need to have 5 pretty slow velocity reps in a set for it to be fatigue. You basically get like between 3 to 5 stimulating reps. Okay. And so what that means is, as far as hypertrophy goes, at least for me, from what I've seen, I tended to pull my repetition effort stuff back into lower rep ranges, like more like, between 4 and 8s a lot recently. because I've started to realize like, okay, if the goal is just to get as many get these 3 to 5 stimulating reps, and I also with the main goal being ready force development and power development, even if if I can develop tissue and develop hypertrophy muscle mass in lower rep ranges and also still get those benefits and not kind of have the interference effect of a high rep range and a low rep range and rate of force development, it makes a lot more sense for me to use lower rep ranges. So I've started to kind of tend to pull some of my repetition effort down a bit, and so they're getting stimulating reps pretty much right off the rip on their repetition effort. Doesn't mean I'm doing triples on tricep extensions, though I have, and singles on chin ups, which I have and I have recently. Doesn't mean I'm doing that for everything. It just means that I'm lowering the rep ranges a bit. So I'm not using 15s and 20s as much as I used to. I'm using a lot of like 4 to 8s for dumbbell presses, chin ups, pull downs, push downs, face pulls, all types, anything that I can load effectively. I'm going to do a band stuff. Obviously, with band stuff, I'm not going to be able to load it as effectively in that 4 to 8 rep range. So generally, band stuff. And again, the adaptations I'm getting from bands are a little bit different than straight weights. So I'll still tend to use those at higher volumes. But again, when it comes to hypertrophy, I do think that you probably are closer being correct, being on the lower end. Because aside from like the firing patterns of the motor units, you're also not accumulating as many metabolites, which means ultimately, if I can fatigue fibers and I can create tissue change and I can lower the amount of metabolites that I accumulate, which is just fatigue, that means that I can do another bout of that later in the week. And so when you look at that, if I pull back on the volume, but I keep the intensity high and I keep the volume enough to create change, but I limit fatigue, okay, I can increase frequency. And so what that means is that now I can get two days of stimulating um, kind of training sessions, okay, because I'm limiting metabolite accumulation. So this is another important thing to kind of think about when you're looking at training programs is how can I have as many stimulating sessions as possible in a week rather than just fucking crushing them in one session. Okay, so something to think about, even on your repetition effort work, which many people get lazy with how they program repeated effort, right? They get lazy. They just throw on the 3 sets of 10 and call it good. I think if we're trying to optimize things, I think you can actually do a lot less work and get a lot more change and actually have less interference effect kind of happening between those heavy weights and the rate of force development kind of work versus those that, repeated effort hypertrophy type work. I think if we actually use that same kind of like seriousness and focus on, programming or repeated effort stuff rather than just looking at like muscular weaknesses, but actually looking at like actual nervous system adaptation and like the ability to avoid fatigue, I think that we'd have a lot more success kind of our athletes programs. And I've seen that for my own athletes. So that's something that I would kind of throw out there as well. And I said, and the last thing I have on here, fatigue management. Okay, when force is produced, metabolites are going to be transient in that process. So metabolites will accumulate via force to, basically to attempt to clear different acids and things like that in the body. Okay, so metabolites are always going to be present after force production. Okay, metabolites are just fatigue. Okay, and so the goal should always be to maximize adaptation with minimal fatigue. Right. So how can I get the most amount of adaptation with the least amount of fatigue or metabolite accumulation? Okay, lower workloads tend to limit metabolites. Okay, so big picture, low reps, high weights, control your volumes. Okay, that's my big picture here when you're looking at all this stuff. Is obviously we want all these adaptations to occur. We also need to keep our athletes fresh so they can repeat this, basically do this again. The more stimulating sessions I can have in a week, in a month, in a year, the faster we're going to, progress. So ultimately, these are going to be some training strategies and some things that I think are going to help your athletes, if you train athletes or if you're an athlete yourself, take some of these things in mind to keep big picture here. Okay, some of the things that I think are going to be important for kind of improving some of those metrics that we try to improve upon. And so that's kind of my spiel on motor units and kind of their, I guess, their part in training. I know this episode is not going to be for everybody. I'm pretty aware of that. I know that this is like some nerd stuff and things that most people don't care about. Like I said, a lot of people listen to me for like training application stuff. But if you made it this far in the podcast, hopefully you took some things away as far as training application, or maybe you made some connections between, how this training theory kind of plays into actual real life and kind of, all these different things we're trying to improve. But with that being said, I am going to end it here. Thank you guys so much for listening. Um, I've been trying to pump out more podcasts recently. Okay, I've been on some different podcasts, so I've been kind of busy with that stuff. And with summertime, being here in Michigan, I tend to travel and do a little bit more things, so I'm not as available, I guess you can say. But hopefully you found something you enjoyed from that. If you have any questions or anything, any follow ups on this, let me know. Okay. Again, you can reach me on Twitter. It's Zach Goodman. You can also reach me on Instagram. I think it's Zach.Goodman. Okay. You can reach me on either of those platforms. I'm pretty good about getting back to people on that. But with that being said, this is it. Peace.